if you want to go ahead.
Great. Welcome everybody to IMCanadaConnect for March. Really appreciate you all being here and supporting the ARMA chapters across the country. My thanks today to Lauren Demery for hooking us up with Chris Bellman, our speaker today on the security topic. And I'm going to ask Lauren to introduce Chris at that time. If you have questions that you want to ask Chris, just toss them into the chat window and we'll monitor that. And Chris has said he'd be happy to answer questions during the presentation or at the end, either way. So toss things into the chat and we'll let him know if there's questions there that need to be answered. Again, thanks so much for your support of the IMCanadaConnect program across Canada. And good to see all my friends on the on the IMCanadaConnect list today. You all know who you are. I'm going to go away now, and I'm going to leave you for Lauren to introduce Chris.
Hi, everyone, and a warm welcome to Chris, who ARMA SWO is very excited can present today. So Chris is a Cyber Engagement Analyst at the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, or Cyber Centre, which sounds really cool. And he uses his experience to tackle those pesky cybersecurity challenges that face our government. And he has a Ph.D. from Carleton in Ottawa, where he studied the Internet of Things, which is always a favorite topic amongst records people. So welcome, Chris. And I really look forward to hearing about your topic.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, everybody. As introduced, my name is Chris Bellman. I'm an employee here at the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, or as I'm going to mention throughout the talk, we'll call it the Cyber Centre, typically what we call it for short. I'm here today. I was invited to give you this talk. I'm going to be covering a number of things, including the current state of cyber threats and Canada's place in our modern digital world, particularly as it relates to the threats that we're facing. So I'm going to kind of focus on some of the threats that specifically we Canadians face for a variety of reasons. As mentioned, if you have any questions throughout, please just toss them in the chat. Somebody will interrupt and I'll do my best to answer your question. I can't promise I'm going to be able to answer all of your questions, but where I can't, I'll direct you toward our contacts here at the Cyber Centre that will be able to help you out. So the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, the CCCS or the C3S or the Cyber Centre as we'll call it, is Canada's technical authority on cybersecurity. It's part of the communication security establishment here in Ottawa. We are the single unified source of expert advice, guidance, services, and support on cybersecurity for Canadians and Canadian organizations. So we go beyond just federal institutions and provincial governments, all number of Canadian organizations. We work in close collaboration with the Government of Canada departments. That's actually my role specifically. We work with critical infrastructure, Canadian businesses, and international partners to prepare for, respond to, mitigate, and recover from cyber events. The Cyber Centre is the outward-facing portion of the CSE. We welcome all sorts of partnerships that help build a stronger, more resilient cyberspace in Canada. In line with the National Cybersecurity Strategy, the Cyber Centre represents a more cooperative approach to cybersecurity in our country and across borders. We work with a number of different partners throughout the world and within Canada. So the Cyber Centre offers a pretty wide variety of services capabilities, and we categorize these into 6 primary lines of service. I'm not going to go too deep into what these services are themselves, but this is a bit of a background into the types of services that we offer. And these categories include incident handling. So this is us helping support our partners to recover from cyber incidents. The reality is that cyber incidents do happen, and people are often prepared, people are often unprepared. We're here to help fill in any gaps there and help you recover from those. Information assurance services. This is providing technical assistance and advice and guidance on, for example, data confidentiality, data integrity, authenticity, availability, non-repudiation, all those fun technical security terms. Cyber defenses, these are services, tools, and capabilities that we use to help defend Canadian organizations from cyber incidents. So we try to do our best to prevent them in the first place. And advice and guidance, one of our core pillars here at the Cyber Center. And this is all about providing advice and guidance, both pre-made, things that you can find on the internet, and specifically tailored to client requests on a wide variety of topics related to security, of course. We have community building services that are not just technical services and capabilities, but are all about engaging with the cybersecurity community to encourage a strong cybersecurity posture. You could say that this talk here is about the Cyber Center engaging with the cybersecurity community, such as yourself. And finally, the last one, threat intelligence. This is all about providing the information and tools necessary to understand and proactively prepare for cyber threats and cyber incidents. So a lot of the services that we have here, they all come back to maintaining and improving Canadian organizations' cybersecurity posture. So digital technologies are a pretty integral part of our daily lives at this point, and it's seemingly every day there's some sort of new development that comes up, whether it's related to AI and any number of other security topics. From running our businesses to accessing all sorts of government services, there's a lot of them now online, to interacting between each other with our friends and families, these technologies connect Canadians together to each other and to the rest of the world. We will continue to see digital innovation pushed to all sorts of crazy new heights to the benefit of our communities, our societies, and hopefully our planet. On a per capita basis, we Canadians spend the most time online of any other country in the world, at about 43.5 hours per Canadian per month. We're heavily interconnected and networked, and this is a fact that enhances our quality of life, but also unfortunately creates vulnerabilities. From commercial supply chains to the critical infrastructure that our economy and society has come to rely on, the risks in the cyber world have grown significantly. As we embrace digital technologies for their rather massive and significant benefits, we open ourselves up to threats. Cybersecurity is important for everyone. The criminals and any manner of other malicious cyber threat actors, many of which operate outside of our borders, take advantage of the security gaps found in our country, low cybersecurity awareness, and technological developments to compromise systems. They steal personal information, financial information, intellectual property, and trade secrets. They disrupt and sometimes destroy the infrastructure that we rely on for all manner of essential services that we rely on every day. Our approach within the Government of Canada reflects the extent to which digital technologies have become essential to our way of life. With a new cybersecurity strategy, we can live and interact digitally with confidence. And in modern times, cybersecurity is the companion to innovation. So Canadians' relationship with the internet has changed, particularly over the past few years since the start of the pandemic. Things have changed a lot. More people now use the internet to shop, buy groceries, regularly connect with our friends and family, do medical appointments, and work. Today, Canadians work through a combination of in-person, virtual, and hybrid means. Since 2020, more organizations have adopted cloud-based services to work efficiently in this hybrid environment we find ourselves in. But we judge that the threat surface has unfortunately grown to match this growth. More than 1/3 of Canadians worked from home more often during the pandemic, so a pretty significant chunk of us. Now, more than 2 years on, many Canadians are transitioning to a more permanent hybrid work environment. Securely implemented and maintained work from anywhere offers this flexibility to employees and their employers, but it also creates a much larger threat surface that threat actors can and are looking to exploit. Increased access to the internet and just internet connectivity in general, for example, satellite internet for remote parts of the country, has increased internet use for both work and personal reasons, and the widespread adoption of contactless technologies increases our exposure to cyber threat activity, such as data theft, fraud, extortion. You can't go a day without seeing an article in the news about some sort of cyber threat that's happened to some Canadian somewhere. Cybercrime remains the cyber threat tool that is most likely to affect Canadians. This is in part driven by a growing market for cybercrime tools and services readily available online and via online marketplaces and forums, or in private cybercrime communities. Such tools and services include initial network access, they're selling access to networks, distributed denial of service, or DDoS, as you've probably seen or heard, attacks, web defacement tools, malware, which includes ransomware, and money laundering technologies. Instead of targeting organizations directly, cyber threat actors are increasingly targeting the software tools and services that are used by the organizations via supply chain compromises. The threat from supply chain compromises increases where vendors have elevated access to their clients' networks. This kind of relationship is becoming more common, especially as cloud-based software infrastructure and platform as a service models proliferate. By spreading malware through a vendor's updates and services, cyber threat actors introduce vulnerabilities on the vendor's clients' networks. They get right in there. Nation states use malicious cyber activity as a tactic for subversion and power projection to achieve their geopolitical goals. Malicious cyber threat activity by state-sponsored threat actors has become an important tool for states to influence events without reaching the threshold of conflict and to support conventional warfare. In the NCTA 2020, the National Cyber Threat Assessment, we described how nation states are developing competing standards and norms governing the flow of information on the internet. One approach, which focuses on state sovereignty, sees online information primarily through the lens of stability and national security and promotes an internet that will allow states to track their citizens and censor information. Using the internet to censor and monitor populations threatens the openness, transparency, and the multi-stakeholder approach to the internet that Canada and our allies champion. Yet, unfortunately, an increasing number of states are managing their domestic internet in this way. This is just a general overview of some of the cyber threat landscape that I'm going to be talking about throughout the rest of the presentation, and that just faces us and the world in general. So I'm going to be getting into the threats portion of the presentation, but to start, just some brief statistics about cyber incidents that we've had or we've witnessed here at the Cyber Center. So from January 1st, 2023 to the 6th of December, 2023, so the past year, we observed a total of 2,398 incidents. This includes critical infrastructure, non-critical infrastructure, and federal institutions. Of these 2,398, 1,058 were related to critical infrastructure. And there are still 139 incidents at critical infrastructure currently active and are being handled at the Cyber Center. Interestingly, 512 of these, about 48% of the incidents were malicious code or related to malicious code. Some of the names that you might be familiar with included those were 112 instances of bootloader, 28 of Lockbit, 27 TrueBot, and 25 System BC. But interestingly, since bootloader, TrueBot, and System BC can be used to deliver or in combination with malware and ransomware, rather, you can also say that most of the incidents were related to ransomware, highlighting its significance in the Canadian digital landscape. There was just an interesting piece of info. There was a peak in incidents in May and June with a drop in August. I don't know why that is. I'm sure an analyst has looked into that and maybe been able to correlate some things, but it's just an interesting spike. So the top 5 critical infrastructure sectors with incidents start with information and communication technology at about 30%. So 30% of all incidents came from that group. Number 2 was academia and research at about 11%, provincial and territorial governments at another 11%, and then health at 9%, and the municipal government level at 8%. In terms of where these incidents came from, so how the Cyber Center found out about them or we were alerted to them, 41% were from our trusted Cyber Center partners. This includes the CSE proper, the main organization we're a part of, CISA, America's Cyber Center similar organization, and independent researchers. 17% of the incidents were from client organizations, so organizations that work with us here at the Cyber Center. 11% were from the Cyber Center itself. These are ones that we found first. And 11% were from private sectors, usually organizations that feed us threat intelligence like Desjardins. So as you can see, there's quite a lot of incidents that have happened just in the past year. I would imagine that those numbers are potentially going to grow as more and more people get attached to the internet, more and more people become used to it for their daily employment, and as more and more groups start to use it for doing business. So the National Cyber Threat Assessment 2023-2024 presents 5 key judgments. These are the areas that I'm going to be talking about and briefly touching on for the rest of the presentation. So the first, the big one, ransomware. Cybercrime continues to be the cyber threat activity most likely to affect Canadians and Canadian organizations. Fraud and scams are the most common form of cybercrimes that Canadians will experience over the next 2 years as the threat actors attempt to steal personal information, financial and corporate information over the internet. Frauds and scams, including malicious cyber threat activities such as phishing, result in rather significant financial losses. According to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, there have been over 150,000 reports of fraud in Canada, with over $600 million stolen since January 2021, so just the past few years. Due to its impact on an organization's ability to function, ransomware is almost certainly the most disruptive form of cybercrime facing Canadians. Aside from the financial cost of the ransom itself, ransomware can stop the operation of important systems, damage or destroy an organization's data, and reveal sensitive information. This is in addition to imposing costs and time to recover from the attack. This disruption caused by ransomware attacks can prevent access to essential services and, in some cases, threaten Canadians' physical safety. Since 2020, the frequency of ransomware attacks worldwide has increased, and payment demands against large organizations have grown. Critical infrastructure is a particularly attractive target for ransomware. As we note when discussing threats to critical infrastructure, these organizations are perceived by cybercriminals to be more willing to pay significant ransoms to limit or avoid physical disruption and impacts to their customers. Ransomware incidents in May 2021, so just a couple years back, against the Colonial Pipeline in the United States and the North American and Australian operations of JBS Foods resulted in multi-million-dollar payouts to threat actors. These incidents caused rather significant disruptions to both fuel and food supply chains. Cybersecurity reporting indicates that ransom payments have increased since 2020, likely driven in part by increasingly significant demands against large enterprises. Even if victims choose to pay the ransom, there's no guarantees that their data will be recovered. One survey of Canadian businesses found that only 42% of organizations that paid the ransom had their data completely restored. The ransom value often represents only a portion of the total cost of the organization or to the organization. Lost value associated with downtime or unrecoverable data, costs of repairing systems, and reputational damage are just some of the additional costs that can be imposed by ransomware. Critical infrastructure is a particularly attractive target for ransomware. As we know when discussing threats to critical infrastructure, these groups are more perceived as being more willing to pay significant ransoms to limit the interruptions. This is largely information that I just covered, but it goes to note that the threats to critical infrastructure and Canadian organizations due to ransomware are significant, not just in the ransom payouts that they're potentially asking for, but just in all of the other added costs and issues that come with it, such as recovery, people finding out that there was a ransomware attack, loss of data, and reputational risk. Oh, sorry, we don't need to watch that. We assessed that the state-sponsored cyber programs of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea continue to pose the greatest strategic cyber threats to Canada. State-sponsored cyber threat activity against Canada is a constant, ongoing threat that is often a subset of a larger global campaign undertaken by these states. These campaigns target Canada for a variety of reasons, including our association with groups such as NATO and the G7. While state-sponsored cyber activity targets Canada directly, our high degree of global connectivity and technological integration, especially with our allies, also increases that threat exposure. Malicious cyber threat activity sponsored by states almost certainly impacts Canadian individuals and organizations, whether they are the intended targets or not. Adversary states are interested in monitoring and disrupting the activities of individuals who they believe threaten their domestic security and stability. State-sponsored threat actors, or cyber threat actors, almost certainly target foreign nationals, activists, and journalists to monitor and control them. This activity likely threatens individual safety and security, in addition to increasing distrust and polarization in Canadian society. In the NCTA 2020, we discussed how state-sponsored cyber threat actors target large databases of personal information and use data science to identify, profile, and track individuals, likely enabling further cyber threat activity. As the amount of information posted online increases, it becomes easier for threat actors to collect and analyze the information. When the data is transmitted through or stored on servers physically located in foreign states, that state can far more easily compel private organizations to comply with or supply the data, threatening the privacy of Canadians if data is stored in and on those servers. The interconnected nature of communications technology and data processing means that without the appropriate safeguards, Canadians' personal information can be compromised when cyber threat actors compromise foreign entities. Data is transmitted all over the world. It's stored all over the world. Threat actors can have an easier time accessing it around the world. State-sponsored threat actors, State-sponsored threat actors engage in commercial espionage, targeting intellectual property and other valuable business information with the goal of sharing stolen information with state-owned enterprises or domestic industry in their home country. Commercial cyber espionage is often a broad spectrum of activity that includes intellectual property theft, foreign intelligence operations, covert equipment and materials acquisition, and export control violations. If successful, this activity can result in lost revenue, reputational damage, and lost investment for research and development. We assess that over the next 2 years, Canadian organizations with information of value to foreign states particularly will almost certainly continue to be targeted by state-sponsored actors. In 2021, we observed that state-sponsored cyber threat actors conducting operations for financial gain, very likely in part to alleviate the impact of international economic sanctions. States' encroachment into financially motivated cyber threat activity increases the likelihood that Canadian individuals and organizations will be impacted by state-sponsored cyber threat activity. For example, North Korean state-sponsored cyber threat actors will almost certainly continue targeting financial institutions to generate revenue. North Korean cyber actors have targeted individuals and organizations, including in Canada, by developing malicious cryptocurrency trading applications that can be used to capture individuals' credentials and steal their funds. State-sponsored threat actors also use cyber tools associated with cyber criminals to achieve geopolitical goals, including disrupting adversaries. Ransomware has been used by state-sponsored threat actors to disrupt their victims' operations and steal valuable business information, in addition to collecting funds from the ransom payment itself. By adopting the tactics of cyber criminals, state-sponsored cyber actors are likely attempting to avoid the blame and hide their activities. For example, Iranian state-sponsored cyber threat actors have used ransomware against organizations in the Middle East and the US. Throughout late 2020 and 2021, researchers identified several Iranian cyber threat actors deploying ransomware. In many cases, these attacks are used to enable commercial espionage while also resulting in a payout for the threat actors. It's a bit of a double whammy there. We assess that misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, or MDM as we'll call it, propagated by state-sponsored cyber threat actors represents an ongoing, persistent threat to Canadians. Canada's active participation in the international community and members in key organizations such as NATO and G7 almost certainly makes Canadians a target for online foreign influence campaigns. While we assess that Canada is not the primary target for Russian campaigns, Russia disinformation does target the West and has opportunistically seized on events implicating Canada. In April 2022, the CSE reported that Russia was spreading MDM, again, misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, about Canadian force members committing war crimes in Ukraine and using fake images to back up false narratives about Canada's involvement in the conflict. In one online survey of Canadian social media users, over half of the respondents reported encountering MDM related to the Russian invasion of Ukraine on social media. So a very, very large percentage of people viewing social media have seen a lot of this. Online foreign influence activity may very likely also target linguistic minorities and diaspora communities in Canada. State-sponsored cyber threat actors aim to influence these groups to minimize dissent and support the policies of their country of origin. These groups often interact on platforms that are semi-closed and censored according to the restrictive content regulations, meaning that MDM can very likely spread more easily throughout these groups. For example, WeChat, a social media app from China used by billions around the world, has been used to spread MDM and propaganda specific to Chinese diaspora. The rapid development of technology has created many opportunities for those successful in creating, scaling, and deploying innovation. Some deployments can be said to be disruptive because they fundamentally alter the area of application, providing significant improvements over existing technologies or new approaches that make incumbent technologies obsolete. However, regulation often struggles to keep up with this development, and the implications and the risks of adoption are not always initially clear. Just as advanced technologies can be used to support commercial and public objectives, they can be maliciously deployed by sophisticated threat actors. This section discusses 3 of the technological trends we assess as having the potential to disrupt their respective fields: digital assets and decentralized finance, machine learning, and quantum computing. While these technologies are in varying states of development and realization at this point, they all have implications for Canada's economic prosperity, national security, and individual safety and privacy of Canadians. An insider threat is anyone who has knowledge of or access to your organization's infrastructure and information, and who uses the information, either knowingly or unknowingly, to cause harm. Insider threats can put your organization's employees, customers, assets, reputation, and interests at risk. However, there are security procedures that you can implement to reduce the risks. Small and medium organizations, or SMOs, face growing cybersecurity concerns, including phishing and ransomware attacks that can compromise the sensitive information and lead to financial or data loss. In this slide, we summarize the foundational security actions that you can take to begin building your cybersecurity resilience. For one, use different complex passwords for each device and account. Threat actors know people reuse the same passwords across different accounts. If threat actors can access your devices and accounts, they can take them over, lock you out, and steal the sensitive information that you store. Instead of relying solely on your password for protection, you could also use multi-factor authentication, or MFA, as well. With multi-factor authentication enabled, you must provide your identity in multiple ways, multiple factors, in order to log in, which provides additional layers of protection and time to respond in the event that a threat actor knows your password. Another one, update operating systems and applications automatically. Updates and patches address known security vulnerabilities, fix bugs, and improve the usability and performance of applications and operating systems. Postponing or ignoring updates and patches leaves your OS and applications vulnerable to cyber threats. Threat actors look for known vulnerabilities, backdoors, and other ways to access your network systems and information. If you go and take a look at some of the CVEs, the vulnerability databases online, you'll find that a lot of the items in there are all for old versions of software. A lot of the vulnerabilities are for old versions of software. So it really drives home the importance and the need to update your software. Next one, back up your data. If your network systems or information are compromised by a threat, such as ransomware, which is a big one, or damage from natural disaster, or a backup enables your organization to reduce the risk of data loss, minimize your downtime, and restore your essential services. Next one, install security software on your networks and devices to add another layer of protection. Security software like antivirus software scans. They scan systems and files for malware, block it from being downloaded, and detects anomalies or malicious behavior in your systems. A virtual private network, or a VPN, acts as a tunnel that allows your encrypted data to go through the internet securely and away from malicious actors. Ensure that your organization has security software installed on its network and devices. Consider a protective domain name system, or a PDNS, service to protect your employees from inadvertently visiting potentially malicious domains on the internet. Another one, train employees on basic cybersecurity practices. Proper training is one of your first lines of defense against cyber threats. Training ensures that your employees understand the security risks associated with their actions and how to identify security or cybersecurity attacks that they may encounter through email and on the web. And finally, have an incident response plan ready. Cyber threats, national disasters, and unplanned outages impact your network systems and devices. While you might think that your organization won't experience an incident, many Canadian businesses are experiencing heightened threats or the tangible impacts of cybercrime. The unfortunate reality is that incidents do happen, large or small, and you want to be prepared for it when that happens. By having an incident response plan, or an IRP, your organization will be prepared to respond and recover from the incidents when they do happen. These foundational security actions will help your organization begin to build its cybersecurity resilience. However, residual risks do remain. If your organization has the capacity and is ready to implement more security actions, consider 1, outsourcing security to a managed service provider, or an MSP, or a cloud service provider, a CSP. They can remotely manage or host all or part of your organization's IT infrastructure, monitor and patch security devices and systems for you, and take actions on your IT systems to prevent compromises. Many of the services are offered on demand, so cost and complexity are scalable according to your organization's needs and resources. The Cyber Center also offers publications for doing things such as this. For example, choosing the best cybersecurity solution for your organization. So the advice is out there. Number 2, setting up a secure administration workstation. You can do this by setting up this workstation so it's isolated from the network and doesn't have web browsing or email enabled, really locked down. It should be the most bare minimum workstation that doesn't have the capability to install any other software except for the administration software. So very minimal install. For more information on foundational security practices, security actions for small organizations, you can review the Cyber Center's online publications or get in touch with the Cyber Center to ask questions directly. But these approaches are only effective if your organization adopts a culture that values cybersecurity. Your posture should include a more proactive approach to cybersecurity. Organizations should prepare and implement a detailed cybersecurity incident response plan to ensure that a cyber incident can be handled quickly and efficiently, as this can mitigate the impact of an incident. An effective plan should be comprehensive and, in particular, include a lessons learned piece to limit the impacts of future cyber incidents. If you understand what happened in any given incident, next time you can be better prepared to handle it. Cyber threats, natural disasters, and unplanned outages are examples of incidents that will impact your organization. The Cyber Center has various publications on our website to provide you with guidance on how to prepare for when, and if not if, a cyber incident occurs. For example, we have one called Developing Your Incident Response Plan. Very helpful in this regard. As information management representatives within your organizations, you should have an awareness of the cybersecurity risks your organization takes. Therefore, you must approach your role with the aim of assisting your entire organization to adopt a culture that values cybersecurity. Regardless of the future challenges facing your organization, facing Canadians, the approach your organization adopts should foster a culture where cybersecurity is taken seriously. Following our advice and guidance here at the Cyber Center on cybersecurity and device management, it will help limit the chances of your organization falling victim to malicious activities such as phishing emails and infected downloads. We have seen and continue to see threat actors target executives within organizations, all the way down to help desk staff. Nobody is immune at your organization. In addition, there are several ways in which organizations in Canada can prepare for cyber attacks and mitigate the cyber risks that they're facing. The first step is often to address the lack of awareness of cyber risks. Just understand what risks are out there. We continue to see that most cyber incidents occur because of 1, human error, 2, poor cyber hygiene, for example, the lack of multi-factor authentication or poor passwords, or 3, poor risk awareness, for example, an inability to spot a phishing scam. With the resources available on our website, the Cyber Center's website, our aim is to help you establish effective cybersecurity capabilities to respond to the challenges that cover both the technical and the human sides of security. They're both equally important. Finally, collaboration across institutions in the government is critical to providing digital assets in our institutions and in Canada. While there are many challenges and gaps in current systems, we all have a critical role to play to help close those gaps and vulnerabilities that foreign adversaries will definitely not hesitate to take advantage of. The Cyber Center and other government departments work with critical infrastructure to develop the capacity to conduct due diligence and assesses the risks to research security. The scale and efficiency of threat actors is often derived from their abilities to collaborate with each other. Therefore, it is imperative that all of us work together to get ahead of the cyber attack capabilities of those threat actors that are also working together. In this way, security becomes a team sport. Our vision is a future in which all Canadians play an active role in shaping and sustaining our nation's cyber resilience. The culture of security is important everywhere, and we all play a role in this. This includes, for example, community collaboration, threat assessments, advice and guidance, vulnerability management, threat detection, secure communications, and intelligence and info sharing of security items. The Cyber Center is working hard to raise the cybersecurity bar across Canada, together with our partners in industry, academia, and all levels of government. But cyberspace has no borders, and with the potential for cyber incidents, exists wherever we are connected, which nowadays is effectively everywhere and all the time. So cyber threats are out there, and we're all potentially vulnerable to them. It'll take consistent effort from every sector of society to make Canada one of the safest places to live and work online. The Cyber Center has mapped out where the trends are now and where they're headed. And it's now up to us all to act on that information. For example, you can get some good, simple, and effective cybersecurity tips. You can find them online. One of the campaigns that we run is called getcybersafe.gc.ca. It has a whole bunch of great advice and guidance for all levels of staff at an organization. And in general, check out our advice and guidance at cyber.gc.ca/en/guidance. It's our advice and guidance portal. There's a ton of really great stuff on there. So that wraps up my talk here. Just like to highlight that the Cyber Center, the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, we're a very open organization. We love hearing from all sorts of different groups around Canada, whether it's federal, municipal, provincial, private organizations. Please get in touch with the Cyber Center if you have any questions about cybersecurity or curious about some of the services that we offer and things that we might be able to help you out with. So I hope everyone enjoyed my presentation here. I'm happy to try to take any questions that I can. And that is the end of what I've got here. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and nobody's put any questions in chat, but if you'd like to, you can enter questions in chat there. Just to kind of start off the kind of questions just from my end, more about the actual security center itself. There's lots of information you posted there. We'll make sure to get that out as a follow-up post to this in an email that'll come around so everybody can get that. But just even at the cybersecurity, I bet you guys are targeted with this stuff, just like everybody else. You guys are not kind of immune to it. So I'm sure you guys practice what you preach, but is there also other things that might be above and beyond what a regular organization, being the security center itself, that you have to deal with?
Well, there's certainly, and the things that I can talk about, it's nobody is safe from being targeted from these sorts of groups. There are threats that face everybody, even from the most secure to what we can call the least secure federal institution. But that said, we all work together here in the federal institute or federal government to try to keep each other protected. There are certain practices, there are certain roles and responsibilities that we have that do go a bit above and beyond what we would preach for general organizations, but especially in talks like this, we like to, there's a lot of things in security, a lot of practices that you can put into place that are very detailed, very technical, very, what even you might say intrusive, that will help protect you. But some of the most valuable things that you can implement are some of the most high level and seemingly obvious. A couple of the points that I mentioned earlier was about using multi-factor authentication and making sure your passwords are good and that your systems are being patched. These seem like things that you see all over the place online. Everybody's always saying to do these things, but there's a reason everybody says to do these things, because they are the most valuable, the biggest bang for the buck things that you can do. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not getting an update pushed to me on my laptop by my organization because of how important it is to have every piece of software updated as best you can. As I mentioned earlier, you can take a look at these vulnerability databases online and look at the sort of the vulnerabilities that are out there. And so many of them are related to older, not updated, not patched software. So that's just an example of the importance of these things that we say. They're not high level for no reason. They're high level because they're so valuable and they work for a huge number of people. One example, and we brought up IoT earlier, and you mentioned that people were interested. If anybody's familiar with the Mirai botnet from a few years ago, it was a botnet that infected IoT devices. And what all it did was just try connecting to devices and try default passwords. And it got millions and millions of compromises just from simple default passwords, showing the value in just the most simple things like changing a password to not make it default, making it something unique. And that immediately cancels out threats like that. Yep. So to come back to your question, I know I strayed a little bit. Yes, there are certain very technical, very, very detailed, and over the top, some might say, practices that are put in place by security organizations. Yes, I can't talk about them, or I'd rather not talk about them here. But I think the message that I want to leave you with on that is that the things that we preach, we do practice because they're important.
Yeah, no, that's great. So there are a couple of questions here. Brian's got his hand up. I'll allow you to talk here. Just as I read the first one here, there's a question just about Linux servers. Is it in general more secure to have Linux servers? Is kind of the question.
I don't know if anything would be necessarily more or less secure, just depending on the software you're using. I think it seems too high level to just say that, oh, I'm using Linux, therefore I'm more protected. There might be more of a culture of security, but at the end of the day, if things are misconfigured, if you're vulnerable to the same threats that would be on a Windows server or something else, those threats still exist. So I don't think you can look at it in terms of, oh, my operating system is better than yours, or oh, mine's weaker than yours, or whatever. Look at it in terms of the threats that the individual threats that face what your use case is. You could still have Apache installed on your Ubuntu server, and it could still face the exact same threats that you would face on a Windows server. Now, if you get really low level, there might be different ways of handling things. But I think in terms of the use case, you got to look at the individual threats.
Yeah, and most of the threats, it's still the same person sitting at that keyboard, where a lot of the threats are coming through the person sitting there, not so much this. Yeah, that's good. Brian,
well, sorry, just to extend real quick, you also got to look at the business case of it. If there's, for example, if there's way fewer people using Linux servers and way more people using Windows servers, there's much more bang for a buck for an attacker to go after the one that everybody is using versus the one that very few people are using. So there's a lot of things you got to look at when you try to make that decision.
Yeah, Brian, do you okay? Go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead, Chris. Awesome presentation. I just want to commend you on that and making that information available to everybody. I'm particularly interested in, because we have a very aging population, And I mean, that's like the group from age 40 and older are used to very different habits than younger people. Is there things on your website, or can you mention about resources to help them better understand that cybersecurity is a requirement, not an option?
We do have material for that. Just to touch on your last point about it being a requirement and not an option, that's a good point, or rather a good question. I can't really speak on how much we talk about that in general, being that we want you to, obviously we want everyone to pay attention to security. We obviously want everyone to have an understanding of it. I can't speak to how much our organization pushes toward trying to get people and tell them that, hey, this is required. But that said, we have things here like the getcybersafe.gc.ca or just the Get Cyber Safe campaign that is designed to be used and accessed by anybody in Canada. There's a wide range from the young to the older. Everybody in between can learn things, very straightforward, basic things in a very accessible way. It's a good campaign for learning about this sort of stuff. So it's not just the young audience, not just the older audience. Everybody has something to learn from it. What's the saying in security? Your organization is only as secure as the weakest link. Not to call a human a weak link, but it's important that everybody at an organization is aware of some of these things, because if somebody is vulnerable in any number of ways, it doesn't matter how secure the rest of the organization is, people can get in, or might be able to get in. There are risks there. So to circle back around to your question, I can't speak on whether or not we have materials that specifically target different age groups, but we have very good broad advice and guidance that can be provided. And you can take a look at our advice and guidance section on our website. There's a whole bunch of publications ranging from fairly technical to fairly high level for a wide audience. And then you can pick through and look at any number of options in there.
Just another question here, kind of the difference between a VPN and antivirus. So if I have a VPN, do I still need antivirus protection, or should I have both?
Ideally, you would have both. A VPN is just a tunnel that takes you from point A to point B. It's not inherently any more or less secure on the endpoints. If let's say you're going through just a tunnel under a mountain, sure, the sun might not get to you when you're in the tunnel, but it's still going to get to you before you go into the tunnel, and it's still going to get to you when you come out of the tunnel. Same thing with your traffic. Depending on where the end or what endpoints you're talking to, you're still vulnerable once you're outside the tunnel, potentially. Now, it's not to say that a VPN makes everything immediately safe for browsing, but both a VPN and antivirus software play two different roles. You could say that a VPN is more for the actual communication session and the traffic being sent back and forth, whereas an antivirus, anti-malware software is much more appropriate for looking at the data that's coming into your host, your computer, and things like your downloads and emails and stuff like that. So yes, ideally you'd use both.
Great. Just to kind of circle back, I know we got a bit of time here. Just a quick question more on the Cybersecurity Center again, trying to, you've obviously got a lot of great resources and stuff here, but can you talk to why the organization exists to begin with? I know, for example, the idea that tomorrow's threats are different today's, that we often have to be reactionary to things that happen. We don't know that, North Korean hackers are going to start pushing out a new hack, so we have to respond to those kinds of things. So maybe just talk to what the cybersecurity is and why it exists.
So historically speaking, the CSE has not been the most forward-facing or public-facing organization. And in 2018, the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity was spun up as the public-facing entity of the CSE to try to engage with Canadian organizations, and to help protect us based on the threats that we see and the threats, trying to be proactively engaging in future threats. So the Cyber Center is the way, it's the resource for Canadian organizations to have someone to reach out to learn about cybersecurity from our own government. It's not the super technical, secretive organization. It's an open organization that you can come to, you can get information from, access a number of different services depending on if you're an organization, an individual, private organization, critical infrastructure, whatever, and be put in the right direction to help protect our country and our citizens. Because it's not, especially on the internet when we're all so connected, the compromise of one host or one organization could potentially impact a whole bunch of other organizations, especially within our own country. If one of our federal institutions is compromised, then the users that go to it are now being compromised and potentially losing their data, being scammed, they're being phished. So having a unified source for help with all this and an authority in the country to help secure these sites that everybody uses, it pays dividends for everybody involved in or all stakeholders involved in an organization and our country.
Yeah, okay. Another question here. So have you encountered any cyber attacks specifically intentionally changing information rather than deleting or stealing it? Where information is just changed?
That's a good question. I can't speak on that. That would be something you'd have to contact the Cyber Center for directly if they can tell you that. But you bring up a good point. If the integrity of data is a very important aspect of security, it's not just about confidentiality or having the data to begin with. It's about making sure that specific information isn't being changed. Let's just use a really basic example. Let's say I'm going to my bank and I want to withdraw $100. If a malicious adversary can somehow get in there and add an extra couple of zeros, all of a sudden I'm trying to withdraw $10,000 or $100,000. So the impact of modified data in whatever application it might be is not insignificant. So potentially it could just be just as worrisome as stealing the data to begin with, but I can't say that I know of any specific instances where that has happened. It is a big issue though.
I can speak to one that I know. I was involved in an organization and it wasn't a cyber attack. It was actually, I guess it's still classified as that, but an internal disgruntled employee did it. It wasn't a third-party attack on it. It was actually an internal attack that, somebody was being let go and wasn't pleased with the situation and actually went in and changed and deleted records and code. It was actually a code base as well. So
yeah, the insider threats arguably more worrying because they have the access. They don't even need to try to get into your system. They've already got access to your system.
Yeah.
Good call.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. We're getting close to the end of the hour here. I don't know, Laura and Rick, do you want to ask or wrap things up here?
Sure. I'm still flabbergasted at the beginning of your presentation when you said that Canadians use the internet the most. I just find that unbelievable. But the absolute numbers of people affected by cybercrime is just unbelievable to me. And this is what's reported, right? So
this is just what's reported.
So I just can't believe how much unreported crime goes on. So thank you for sharing today. I'm so happy that you could join us.
Yeah, cybercrime is not an insignificant thing, and it's some of the most straightforward, simple, just a human-to-human connection that is what gets it. It gets you, right. It's tough, and that's why we got to be all very aware of it.
Well, I'll start to close up, I guess, then. I didn't introduce Troy, and I'm sorry about that, Troy. I'm Rick Sterling. I'm the president of Western IM, and if you're anybody that hasn't been on before, sees a Western IM up there, the Western IM supports the IMCanadaConnect discipline across the country with all the chapters. So we try to make sure that there's Canadian content using IMCanadaConnect in conjunction with all our chapters across the country, ARMA chapters across the country. Troy is one of my partners, and Troy also runs all these sessions. So thanks, Troy, for what you did. Chris, really enjoyed the presentation. Thanks so much for being here today. Nice to hear that the federal government of Canada is doing some cool stuff for all of us here in the country. And Lauren, so thank you to you and Southwestern Ontario chapter for bringing Chris to us today for this presentation. So really happy to see that. Just couple of things I wanted to say that maybe closes the loop for some people. Things that came to mind while Chris was presenting today is a presentation that was done by Saskatchewan chapter not too long ago pointed to an important fact that the privacy people are kind of ramrodding now things to be disposed of in organizations. We can't keep it forever. If anybody saw that, or if they didn't see it, all the recorded sessions are still on the Western IM website. We keep all the sessions that we do on IMCanadaConnect, and that one is still there. It was only a few weeks, last month or the month before, I can't remember which now, but they were talking about privacy and records and information management as disciplines. And the privacy people are now pushing to make sure that things aren't kept forever in organizations. And I think this ties in very nicely with that whole cyber threat. The less things that are available on a network, the less things we have to worry about being breached in a cyber attack on a network as well. I think that was important. The other thing is that for any of you that don't know this particular thing, that there is a kind of an association like ARMA on the security side. If you hear people talk about ISACA, that is the security kind of equivalent to ARMA International for security people. So if you're interested in actually going deeper and deeper into the security side, many of us belong to ISACA as well as ARMA for that reason. Thanks again for everybody for sharing today, coming to the session. Thanks for supporting IMCanadaConnect across the country. And next month, actually very quickly now, on the 3rd of April, April being RIM month for ARMA, we have Donna O'Toole, who may be on the session today. I didn't check to see if Donna was on the list, but Donna will be doing a session on things to do for RIM month and how to develop a RIM month program. So really important if you get a chance to come to the session on the 3rd. We haven't got 2 sessions for the middle of the month yet for our RIM month, but on the 24th, we have Toronto doing their session. One of the board is doing a session on the CGSB standards. Sorry, my mouth is not working today. So that'll be really cool. And you should get, if you haven't already got information on those to sign up for them, you'll get that soon. Thanks again. Really appreciate you coming on today. And thanks again to Chris for doing our presentation today. Everybody have a great rest of your week and good long weekend.
See you, everybody. Bye, guys.
Bye now.